Good morning. I am Maureen Pratcher, Treasurer of Heritage Bay Golf and Country Club. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Mr. Philip G. Newman of RSM, a global consulting and auditing firm. Mr. Newman is a certified public accountant and a certified internal auditor and serves as the private club's leader at RSM. He has more than 25 years' experience in public accounting, and in his current private club's leadership and consulting role, he is responsible for a wide range of projects across the United States, including internal control and governance reviews, operational consulting, benchmarking studies, and the development of educational programs for club boards, CEOs, and CFOs. Mr. Newman is a regular contributor to industry publications and is also an honorary member of the Florida chapter of the Club Managers Association of America. His firm, RSM, has conducted the annual audit of Heritage Bay's financial statements for a number of years. We asked Mr. Newman to join us today to give us his uniquely qualified perspective on Southwest Florida country clubs and their operations, finances, and budgeting in particular. As the Heritage Bay Board of Directors prepares to approve the club's 2022 budget, as well as the member assessment for the coming year, we thought it would be helpful to give members an outsider's view of industry trends and how our club compares to similar clubs in weathering some of the current challenges. So thank you, Mr. Newman, for taking the time to be with us, and let's get started. The proposed 2022 Heritage Bay budget calls for a 9.68% increase in member dues, or about $649. How does this compare with other bundled golf communities in Southwest Florida? And more generally, is it realistic to expect dues to remain static from year to year?
Thank you, Maureen. First of all, thanks for coming and talking to me today, or let me talk to you guys. It's been a while. I think the last time I spoke to one of your colleagues was as you were ramping up for the project that's now finished, which is amazing to think about. But the dues increase that you're looking at is not inconsistent with what we're seeing at other similar bundled community clubs in Southwest Florida. It certainly might seem like a lot. You know, I'm not the one that has to write the check, right, on your end, but you are as obviously an owner. And I think that concept of owner is very important. We tend to think of members, but obviously all the homeowners in there are owners in conjunction, together with obviously the whole funding of how the club operation in the community should run. So when you're looking at 9.7%, we got a number of clubs that are looking at double-digit increases. I think that it's important to understand. I think your number last year went up 6%, maybe from 2020 into 21. Well, the average increase for bundle community clubs last year, 2020 into 21, was 9%. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, there's always an element of catch-up if you're not staying with the market. So it's something to be certainly cognizant of. But I can tell you that looking at your operating, where that's going to leave you, your operating dues levels, as well as the reserve assessment for replacement, you're still going to be under the averages that we reported going into 2021. And as you know, we publish a lot of statistics on that. Right. So certainly that's available to, obviously the board, your management, and obviously any member or owner that wants to look at it. It's out there on the web. And I think that will give them a lot of comfort that, hey, we're not out here on an island dealing with that. So I think, unfortunately, I think that's just what we're facing. But the second part of your question there about, dues remaining static, that question comes up from time to time, and it's really unrealistic to think about that being the case. Because if you think of it this way, dues, if you think of it like a business, dues is the biggest revenue driver in your business. Last year it went up by about 10 percentage points as a percentage of total revenue, because obviously all the other revenue decreased because of COVID, right? And you were under construction as well, so you had the double factor. But where you're budgeting for 2022, going to leave you at about 52% of operating revenue. That's right on the average. So, your mix of revenue is right there. To think of not raising dues, on average, we went back a couple of years ago and looked all the way back to the year 2000. Operating costs on average went up 3.3% a year industry-wide. since 2000. So if you try and apply the logic of not applying dues,
Right.
it just doesn't make sense. Nobody wants to pay more than they have to, but this is what we're obviously dealing with today.
Great. The biggest driver in our budget increase is payroll. We're competing with for labor with construction companies, landscape companies, hotels and restaurants, and of course, other private, well-established clubs in the area. So employee retention can be a challenge when facing such stiff competition. What insight can you offer our members on what it takes to address this labor challenge?
Well, you're certainly not alone, right? And I'm not going to tell the homeowners anything that they haven't been hearing on the local news or the national news as well. We all see the challenges that are out there. People need to remember or think back to pre-COVID. We had great labor challenges then in private clubs and hospitality, all in. So COVID just magnified that. I think when you ran down the list of competitors, you missed a few. Now again, Southwest Florida, you missed one of the big ones that a lot of clubs don't think about, are assisted living facilities, who would just love to have the well-trained and talented staff that provide personal service that obviously you guys have at Heritage Bay, as well as these other clubs. So that's a big one. The other big one is Uncle Sam.
Oh.
So, now that has eased off a little bit as some of the federal support through COVID has kind of backed off. But at one point, in order to beat what someone could make on unemployment during COVID in the state of Florida, you would have to pay $21.88 an hour.
Wow.
And people don't think of that number, right?
No.
We hear about the $600 a week, and it's $21.88. That was the magic number at the height of COVID when all this government programs were in play. So that's backing off, but now we're trying to overcome the mentality, unfortunately, that seemed to create in a lot of people. You see the statistics about Americans are quitting their jobs at a greater rate than we've ever seen, and we've experienced that in our business as well. It's not just a hospitality thing. I think the other thing you have to remember with hospitality is we have an incredible public relations problem right now with the workforce. Because who were the first people to be just cut in swathes when this all started?
Right.
It was the food and beverage servers. It was hospitality. And a lot of people who had done that job for a long time suddenly realized how unstable, quote unquote, their job could be. Now, there's a positive spin to that, because I would tell you that the private clubs, including Heritage Bay, have done everything they can to support the employees.
Right.
Versus a lot of the commercial restaurants, hotels, things like that. So we've seen a bit of a move from those kind of hospitality into our private clubs, which is great. Obviously, you got to pay people. We know that. Like you said, that's your biggest driver of your budget. But I will tell you, personally and professionally, that's secondary. Think of the public relations problem. Okay. The number one way to get a new member in a private club, it's been proven for years, are the current members, right? You talk to your friends, you say, there's a great place to live, move down here. It's the exact same for your workforce. The best way to recruit and retain people is to have the current employees tell a great story, okay? So what I would say to every member at Heritage Bay, we're going to have a cost element. Treat your people well. You hear the stories all around the country of just the abuse that food and beverage staff have been receiving over, the last year. You see all the stuff on LinkedIn and social media where people are now saying, no, the customer isn't always right. You just cannot abuse my people. And I would tell you that doesn't cost a nickel for the members at Heritage Bay to just take a second. It's frustrating, right? I visit a lot of clubs. I see the challenges in service that I'd never seen pre-COVID. I see people are still getting up to speed, learning to be trained, all those things. You got to take a deep breath. I don't want to sound like a psychologist, but really, the money comes second to people being treated well. And if you guys can get that reputation in the marketplace, then it's going to solve an awful lot of your problems. So
that's a great message. Thank you for, even though that's, as you say, not financial, it's certainly a great point to consider. Heritage Bay, as you mentioned, completed a $10 million expansion and enhancement project earlier this year. We now have 2 full-service restaurants, 1 poolside and 1 in the clubhouse. While it's logical to assume that bigger food and beverage outlets will mean greater revenues, historically it's been documented across the club industry that the larger the food and beverage operation and the greater the hours of operation, the higher the food and beverage subsidy or deficit or member subsidy. Can you talk a bit about this paradox? And can you also address whether it would be wise to limit the hours of operation in one of our new food and beverage outlets in order to reduce payroll and other expenses, and by extension, member dues?
Right. You're the first club member to ever ask me about food and beverage. My standing line about food and beverage in member-owned clubs is, I think it's somewhere in the documents that it says when you join a club you automatically become an expert in food and beverage in a club, because it is the concept and the issue that we talk about all the time. I think, Maureen, you've seen some of the stuff we've published on this.
Yes.
If you have members that really, are confused by how this sort of paradigm works, please share the white paper we have, because it's still kind of, a lot of our clients just push that out routinely to say, hey guys, here's the realities of operating food and beverage in a private club environment. I always like to start with, and there's a lot of elements to that. We have a concept called the circle of truth that I'm sure you've seen, which highlights the differences between the private club and the restaurant operation. But the starting point for all of it is you have, and correct me here, you have 1,250 doors.
Correct.
You can Google and look up any major restaurant operation, TGI Friday, Outback Steakhouse, McDonald's, and you can find online their kind of parameters for giving you a franchise. Nowhere in any of those parameters will they give you a franchise if you only have 1,250 families to feed. The number starts too small, right? That's it. So when your facilities are open, obviously at any point, and not everyone's coming at the same time, or they all come at the same time in the private club, and I'm sure your general manager can talk about the challenges there. The biggest thing in the cost differential side, though, that people just seem to forget is the a la carte is relatively similar. The a la carte dining, you walk in, you order your hamburger. Where there's a huge difference is what I'll call club functions. So I'm sure you have a lot of great functions through the year. Valentine's Day, hopefully St. Patrick's Day. I don't know if there's enough members here at New Year, but all those kind of functions. The cost, and those things are all priced appropriately to get members to come and join the club, come and enjoy the club, because you're already paying the dues, right? You're paying your dues. Here's fantastic ways we get people together to really enjoy the member experience. Well, the cost of that all goes into your food and beverage, and that's a huge, that in itself, no commercial restaurant is going to run events like that, price like that, and you can look at what a Valentine's Day dinner out costs just for two people, let alone a party. So that's some of the cost differentiators, as well as obviously in the slow season, which isn't getting that slow anymore, as people seem to be staying in South Florida longer. But obviously you've got to carry some of the fixed labor during that slower season, and you're thinking there really of some of your chefs and those kind of positions. While you may scale back on servers, some of those other, your top talent is going to be here, and you got to keep that. So all of that factors into, the cost equation within the food and beverage department. The concept of closing the hours or reducing the hours, I'm sure a lot of people bought houses in Heritage Bay over the last year.
Yes.
We know real estate has been incredible.
Through the roof.
Gated community clubs have done really, really well. But what you guys are offering with the new facilities, boy, I'm sure that was really attractive. So now, Maureen, are you really telling me somebody's suggesting that I went and bought a house in Heritage Bay, got sold on these amazing amenities, and now, like the kid in the pram, you're going to take the toy away from them? You can't use it, right? Here it is. It's lovely, shiny, new penny. You can't use it. It just doesn't make sense. And there's a phrase I came across a few years ago. I honestly can't remember where I got it from, but it fits private clubs so well, particularly the dining operation. So it goes something like this. We budget for the mission. We don't change the mission to suit the budget. So if you'll allow me to look at your mission statement, You're going to manage the club in a manner that will maintain your status as being the leading golf member-owned club, providing outstanding amenities, programs, and services. So go ahead, cut your hours, but you may as well redo your mission statement at the same time. It doesn't make sense. The operation is subsidized. Your current budget for 22, I believe, is projecting a food and beverage subsidy of 141%. That's actually less than the pre-COVID we saw of 146% in the industry. So your expectations are not out of line. And again, what we typically see when you reopen a facility like this, you're going to see revenues of 40, 50, 60% for the next couple of years. Your people want to use the club. Your members want to use the club.
Right.
This is the cost associated with that. So I certainly think, if you're going to change hours and change service levels and things like that, you need to take a breath and go back to your mission statement and say, well, are we really being true to that? Hopefully that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'd like to continue talking about the recent enhancement project at Heritage Bay. The result, as you had said, is a beautiful facility that members are truly enjoying. But the larger physical footprint means additional reserves must be set aside for future repairs and replacements. A new reserve study resulted in a board decision to increase member contributions to reserves by 29%, or about $233 next year. Can you explain in layman's terms why it is so important for a community like ours to have sufficient reserve funding?
Yeah, reserves is definitely one of the issues that's become more and more important over the last few years, because obviously, as you know, you're not alone in terms of amenity improvements. I will say, I remember talking to your colleague on the board in this setting a few years ago, and my last piece of advice to him was, you can never build the bar big enough. And I have to compliment you. I have seen that bar, yeah, and it is phenomenal. It was still hard hat status when I saw it, but that's going to be a lot of fun for your members. Reserves. Look, at the end of the day, the real estate market right now is fantastic, right? Especially if you're a seller. Maybe not so much if you're a buyer, but we know that at some point that that's probably not going to be sustained, over the next 10 years or something like that. But you have to remain competitive. And we saw this even pre-COVID, the communities that could point to, a nice level of reserves, so that if I was buying into your community, I could see on your financial statements, the current owners have accepted they have a responsibility to maintain the assets that they're enjoying and they're using. Someday they're not going to be there, right? And at the end of the day, it's very simple. If I'm going to buy into that community, it's certain, versus the community next door per se, that maybe doesn't have reserves and maybe hasn't maintained the facilities to the same degree, what choice I'm going to make. And again, I think I really can't think of any high-end community clubs like yourselves that are not trying to keep up with the reserves in some way. We have to do it for our own individual homes, right?
Right.
At some point, we have to write the check, whether it's today or tomorrow, and the club is no different. I would say, what I'm seeing, this is where you get the benefit of being a bit of a larger community. The average size of bundle community clubs like yourselves, Southwest Florida, about 990 doors. So that extra 350 doors or so, that helps, right? Because you're dividing by a bigger number.
Right.
And so when you look at your reserve level versus, again, the average of the industry, you're actually still below it, even with the planned increase. So just something else to keep it in context.
Great. Insurance is another line item that will see a considerable jump in 2022. Would you be able to comment on the current trend in insurance premiums for country clubs in our area?
Yeah, insurance is a tough one, right? Because obviously, you price it based on the risk you're associating, the insurer is associating with it. But again, we're seeing insurance go up significantly at most of our clubs, and it's pretty much all kinds of insurance. So certainly, I think that's something that you're going to want. I'm sure you are. Working with your broker to make sure is this the best situation for us. At least you don't have a wood frame clubhouse. We still have wood frame clubhouses in some of our clubs, and they struggle to actually get insurance.
Yeah.
But the thought of not having insurance, obviously we can't go that route. Some people have looked at, self-insuring, but the cost of that on the individual homeowner, that's a real tough sell, right? To have me put money away for something that may never happen.
Right.
So yeah, unfortunately, those increases they're not uncommon.
Okay. All right, supply chain issues are making the news nearly every day, and deliveries are delayed and costs are rising on a variety of products. Price increases, particularly affecting our industry, include chemicals, fuel, and contract labor. Have you seen other clubs add contingencies in their budgets for these line items, or any other new budgeting trends to address these issues?
I'm not sure if I'd say contingencies, but I think, clubs have been trying really hard to be honest with themselves, and that's certainly, my clients, that's kind of what I've been asked. Please try and be honest with yourselves when you're building your budget. I'm going to read from something here because, as you said, this is all I deal with. I don't deal with any other industry. Okay. So I've been having conversations like this with a lot of bundle community clubs like yourselves, and I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact of what these cost increases really are. So this is something, this is not mine. Okay. This is something I got from a competitor club of yours that they put in their budget presentation. Price increases, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but some of this stuff might be used at Heritage Bay, you can tell me. So the percentage increase since January 1, 2021, let's see. Fryer oil, 170%. Corn, which obviously goes into a lot of stuff, 84%. Bacon, I know the members at Heritage Bay love their bacon. Yeah. 72%. Potatoes, Irish, got to look at the potatoes, 53%. And beef tenderloin, 40%. There's a lot more on this list. Golf cart tires apparently have increased 79%. And we know how much use they've been getting, right?
Right.
I wanted to share that because, sometimes we hear, I think last week they came out with the latest inflation figures of 6 point something percent.
Right.
That obviously doesn't even include some of the things that you and I as consumers actually really have to spend our money on. But I think sharing those kind of data points with the members and the homeowners at large, you know it when you're doing your own personal shopping, but when you think of it in terms of like the club making those kind of purchases, that's significant. So I would say, you got to price that in to the product cost, which it sounds like, you guys are certainly trying to do. So not necessarily so much a contingency, but a realization that, hey, these costs are here. And I think the recent information from the Fed is like, I think, we thought inflation was, going to go away rapidly. Not so sure about that.
Not right
so
away.
Sure. No. So fingers crossed, though.
Yeah. Golf was one of the few activities that people felt safe participating in during the pandemic, and we experienced growth in the number of rounds played. Have you seen similar increases in other golf communities, and do you expect this to be a continuing trend? And are there other trends in golf operations that you see impacting the bottom line?
It's funny because this reminds me, when we start talking about golf, it always takes me back to food and beverage, and I think we were talking about, right, everyone wants to talk about food and beverage because everyone eats, right? So, and I think we said your projected subsidy in the budget is 141%. I think, and I'm sure your CFO will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your budget for golf, when you add in the full golf operations, the pro shop, the revenues, and the golf course maintenance expense, that subsidy is 137%. So, we never really want to talk about that, but right. It's a subsidized amenity, just like pretty much everything else. I do see those golf numbers, those golf rounds continuing. How long? That's going to depend on each club, and I think that's all about getting people involved and keeping them enjoying the program, right? So people have played golf. Maybe they went out and bought their first set of sticks in a long time. Maybe they've taken lessons. A lot of the popularity and sustaining the popularity is going to be on your golf shop professionals, making sure people enjoy the game and keep going. But certainly there's nothing on the national scene that suggests that this is going to go backwards anytime soon. They say this has been the best thing for golf since the first coming of Tiger Woods, right?
Right.
So we'll see how long that continues. But But the other side of that challenge, and I'm not sure of all the protocols you had to follow at Heritage Bay, but certainly we saw obviously all those issues with single rider golf carts. And when you think of the pressure that puts on the golf course, I've been hearing a lot of concerns about that from golf course maintenance superintendents. So we'll see, how that goes. The other challenge is obviously managing that number of people going through the golf course, right? The compaction, and I will tell you, this is national. I work with clubs in California, in the Midwest. This is the big thing now. We're trying to manage the compaction on the golf course, that it's still, to your question, still an enjoyable experience to go through that. So I don't know if you're going to see more shotgun starts, stuff like that, but I think that's, at least you got 27 holes, right? You have 27, I remember that. And that's nice, because there's not that many bundle community clubs that have 27 holes in Southwest Florida, so hopefully that will help, you guys more than most. But absolutely, I don't see that backing off anytime soon. And when you look at, if you think of trends like Topgolf and some of those kind of places, and obviously we've got one opening up the street here, right in Fort Myers. I see it off the highway. It looks huge. So that's all good, I think, for the game of golf. It keeps people interested, and so I think expect to see more of that for the foreseeable future.
Great. Do you have any other insights about club operations or even trends outside the industry that could have an impact on club finances going forward?
Well, obviously, COVID is still rumbling around, right? We like to think it's well in the rearview mirror, but it's certainly still out there, and I think we're still going to have challenges with that. Obviously, we've got the as we sit here in mid-November, we're waiting for the OSHA rules from the president's order to sort of shake out and see how that all gets applied. That can be a challenge. We're going to have to force our people to be vaccinated. All of those things that are going to be very, very challenging, and arguably there'll be a cost associated with those. So we have to keep our eye on that. And then just generally anything else coming out of Washington, this is more impacting, us as individuals and members in terms of the spending bills and things like that, So, how the tax rates are going to move, that's going to be very interesting. I think, to your earlier question about labor, it will be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how quickly clubs are willing to adapt technology solutions to labor that previously you wouldn't have seen. And if you think, I can think back to pre-COVID, walking through JFK and seeing seeing a restaurant and it was just a bank of iPad-looking kind of things. There was no one taking orders. You just punched it in. Someone showed up with with your food at some point. Are we going to be going to that point? I don't know. On the golf course, pre-COVID, John Deere was already experimenting with drone technology for spraying golf courses. I've got a few clubs that have got robot cutters for greens.
Oh, really?
So,
wow.
That might be, typically in our human history, technology solves the problem, right?
Right.
A lot of our clubs historically have used foreign labor. There's obviously a challenge. That's a supply chain issue right now as well.
Right.
Whether people can get into the country to work, whether they want to come. With everything that's been going on, and again, that kind of ties you back to COVID. A lot of the clubs that have foreign labor, and they're trying to keep it this year, what they're running into now is you can't rent an apartment for 6 months. If you're a landlord, you don't need that, right? Because people are busting down the doors for 12 months. So all of those kind of challenges, are still filtering through the system. Those are the big ones that I see. I hope the technology gets embraced. A lot of our club members, the thought of, ordering your own burger on the iPad, no, but maybe if you can sell them, well, here's how much it's keeping your dues down.
Right.
That might be the selling point. So those are the big issues, and, hopefully we'll get it all sorted out pretty soon.
Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. You are really a fount of knowledge, and our members, I'm sure, will learn a lot by listening to you. So thank you again for your time.
It's a pleasure. Enjoy that bar, Maureen.
All right.